Asalaamu alaikum. Welcome back to the Muslim Women's Hour. Today we're going to be talking about the autism, Islam, and education. I have with me Tahirah, Himayah, Sabia, who I keep pronouncing her name wrong. She's going to kill me one day. But we're going to have this conversation about education, educational provisions, what works for some children and what doesn't work for some children. And you're going to hear what's necessarily going on in adult lives that helps them navigate the system if they also suffer with ASD. So could we start with you, Tahirah? Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, so I am Tahirah based in Gloucester, work in London as well. So I identify as being neurodivergent. I am dyslexic, I have dyspraxia, ADHD, and traits of autism as well. So lived experience, understand it through a child's view, as an adult view, someone who's in the education system just now, work as a psychotherapist and a clinical supervisor. So broad perspective, so understand it from so many different angles, but appreciate that there are many, many mums that would want more information how to deal with it with their children in particular. But I think it's really important to understand it's a broader thing, it doesn't just start with our children. So
Himayah?
Asalaamu alaikum. I'm Himayah. I am a mother of 5, homeschooling mother of 5. I have I like to say 1.5 children with SEN, one actual child with SEN. The other one's got dyslexia. My son is 12. He's got autism and global developmental delay and a number of other health issues. As I said, they're all homeschooled. And for me, I just, I come from a motherly perspective and a homeschooling educational perspective, I suppose, with that, considering all my children have been homeschooled.
Alhamdulillah.
yeah.
Sabia?
Asalaamu alaikum. My name is Sabia. I am a mum of 4 children. I work for MenCap and I also run my own organisation called Zeal Empowerment Advocacy, and that's advocating for parents and carers that do have children with SEND and emerging needs. One of my children is neurodivergent and she does have a medical condition. So I have that lived experience, and I'm also a nurse by profession. So I'm hoping to shed some light around all different aspects of education. My children have been in secular school, they've been home educated, and now they are in an Islamic school. So all-round perspective, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. The big problem that we have in the community is a lot of people are not willing to or are choosing not to get their children statemented or diagnosed. It seems that that's a problem within the Muslim community on the basis that we don't particularly understand this. Well, we do understand the stigmatization that comes from being not only brown, but also Muslim. And then you don't want to add that extra layer onto your child of them having a statemented diagnosis of an EHCP, which to a lot of Muslim mums puts a target on their child's back. So out of the back of last episode, we had a mum contact who actually said her child is showing signs of having ASD. She is very reluctant for that child to receive a diagnosis because she is not sure how that would work in the long run. Would that be best for her child or not best for her child? I said to her, that's individualized, that's on a needs basis. Could she handle not having an EHCP? And what happens if those situations or the things that are standing out for her progress? What is it that she's going to do in that regard? After having a long conversation with her, she has decided to go ahead with an EHCP. The question is, does anyone want to explain what an EHCP actually is, which is an educational care health plan? Does anyone actually want to explain what it does, what kind of clout it has, and how much of a clout it has? Who wants to take it? Ooh, silence.
I don't actually have one for my son, so I think.
Yeah, why did you choose not to?
I don't see the point because, as I said, my children are all homeschooled. It's of no benefit to me, 0 benefit. There's no funding for homeschool children. There's no help. So I don't see. It was very lengthy. I did fill it in at one point. Actually, it got lost. And then the home education officer here, she did say to me, fill it in and I'll give it. But I just thought it was so long and tedious. And, for me, because he's always been with me and I've kind of maintaining his needs and kind of just doing what he needs, really. I didn't see the point of it. And considering there's no funding, I have no intention of putting him in school. And, it's always the case that, okay, just get one, because if you put him in school, if so for me, if I put him in school, which is hardly, it's unlikely to happen in my opinion. But if I put him in school, if I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, if I put him in school, then I'll just apply for one then, if I feel necessary. But at this precise moment, I don't see the point of. It was a very lengthy form. I just don't have the time.
Okay.
Do you want to kind of go so EHPs are twofold. In order to the first kind of part with it would be requesting it for the young person. But before that, before you even get even near that process, a school has to make reasonable adjustments. So if the child is identified of having those kind of needs, they would need to make reasonable adjustments. It's only if them reasonable adjustments are not helping that child progress and reach their full potential, because that's what educational setting's about, is helping that child achieve and give them equal rights to provision, then they might look at initiating a EHCP assessment, and that's the kind of application to kind of set in motion the kind of all the legwork that needs to be done for an EHCP plan. So any paper that you do fill in is quite lengthy, but a lot of things have to happen before that process even begins. There are pluses to it. There are pros and cons, like anything. Plus, being that yes, it does come with funding. Depending on your child's level of needs, that funding is then allocated to the school and moves with your child. And they're supposed to support that child, whatever's in the EHCP, whatever has been put in there is kind of like a legally binding document that kind of holds schools accountable to what they need to be doing. It holds the local authority accountable for what they need to be doing. And the school is kind of obliged to do those things. However, through all the support that I offer the community, I think the community sometimes feel that this doesn't really actually happen. So there's that as well. And when parents do ask for a kind of breakdown, there seems to be a barrier in accessing a breakdown to, well, what's being given. My child does have an EHCP plan, what's being given within this plan. That sometimes fails to come out. The child's voice is failed to be listened to, and that's in any form, because everybody can communicate. It's just the form that they communicate in is it varies from child to child, parent to parent. That sometimes fails to come out. Parents don't know then after an EHCP that they should be reviewing it every so often. I had one parent that contacted Zeal, and I don't think it had been reviewed for like 2 or 3 years. So the child had obviously changed in that time. Needs were different, things were different. So they don't even know the process afterwards. So even when they do get it, they are in the system with it. They don't even know the process afterwards. And then you've got the parents that are on that kind of line where school will be saying, well, we're not actually going to initiate even a EHCP plan because we feel that your child is doing fine with reasonable adjustments, and we're going to continue just making those reasonable adjustments and just seeing how your child goes. And meanwhile, that child is refusing to go to school. Their well-being is being, impacted. And the parent then feels that, oh, hold on a second, this is not right. Something's not right. And you're kind of in that grey area where school is not on board. They don't want to go ahead with the EHCP plan because they feel that there is no need for a EHCP plan because they're doing perfectly fine without it. But then parents are saying, well, no, my child isn't, and I feel like my child is not doing well without an EHCP plan, and they would benefit with an EHCP plan. And then there's those that parents absolutely deny that their child needs an EHCP plan. They'll be like, no, my child doesn't need it. They're perfectly fine. And there's that, again, it's that denial, that bereavement, that kind of not kind of willing to accept that the child does need this additional support. So it comes in many forms, many kind of forms of getting to this ECP point, with or without it. Yeah.
But then that leads on to what we were talking about last week, isn't it? It's the idea of whether the person accepts that their child has special educational needs in the first place. Are they willing to accept the fact that their child has special educational needs? And are they willing to admit that within inside of the Muslim community, knowing that a lot of the Muslim community would just say, oh, well, you need to think about other alternatives. Maybe it's that your iman is not strong enough. Maybe it's that you're not doing enough. Maybe you should do a bit more ibadah. Maybe you're thinking, oh, if I just do this or if I just do that, is it something I did for the idea of mum guilt? Is it something that I could have done differently during pregnancy? Is it my genetics that are the problem? And you go back to the idea of blaming yourself, but then not accepting that this is the qadr of Allah. It's the qadr of Allah that your child is the way that your child is, and functioning within the world, or them showing up within the world. It could be, in a way, yeah, it is. It's a challenge for you. Not necessarily in the way of people calling their child a test, but more of a sense, this is a challenge for you to try and accept that this is what's going on with your child, and then maneuvering your child through the world and having them have the ability to become viable adults. Because we hear about a lot of children who their parents don't accept that this child has ASD, they're manifesting violent behaviors, and they chalk it up to, oh, he's just a boisterous boy, and then marry him off back home. And that poor woman then has to go deal with the rigmarole of realizing that there's something not quite right about this man.
Yeah,
His parents are not willing to accept that they've left him until he's 21 years old, haven't dealt with the fact that he was beating on his sister and he's got issues, but they just think, it's okay, that's how boys are, and we're just going to marry him off back home. And that poor girl comes to the UK, she doesn't speak a word of English. So she really has no way of helping him. He has no way of helping himself. And then that causes even more problems.
And I think that's why it's important to recognize that it's not just the children, it's the young adults as well. And those young adults become later on adults, but also checking in with the parents, which of the parent is carrying the gene for the child to be autistic or ADHD. So it stems from somewhere. It just doesn't come from thin air either. So really important to check in with ourselves. Have we got traits of something? So, when I particularly look at my own family, I feel there's many of us and siblings that will have traits of either dyslexia or autism, ADHD. It manifests itself, and particularly within the Asian Black communities, we don't talk about it enough either. So it will be a stigma, but it's so important we start with the children. We, if the plans are available, let's not use them to advantage, but to be able to sort of utilize them and help us in that way. And if the children are being homeschooled, so be it. But have you got reasonable adjustments yourself? Have you got the support around you while you're homeschooling? So when my children were younger, I did homeschool some of them. So, and it was important to have tools around me that helped me to do that as well. So
but then that's also an access to resources, isn't it? And then that comes to an economic problem within our community. And that economic problem needs to be sorted also. And that's something we're going to discuss way later on, because I can see that's going to cause a lot of issues for a lot of people, because my opinions are pretty blank on those. So when we talk about that, it means that we're leaving ourselves in a position where we're going to have to be able to advocate for our children. And so many people just don't have the knowledge on how to advocate for our children. This is why we're going down this route of this podcast and talking to each other and having these conversations, so that advocacy is something that we can talk about. And I think we need to talk about the idea that there is a plethora of opportunities for us to deal with our children in terms of home education or mainstream school, SEND school. But I also want people to be able to say, okay, we've tried X and it didn't work, so we tried solution Y. So that we can give mums and dads and even grandparents now are taking care of children while parents are working long hours. So is it a case that we can do more or do less or look at the community in a different way? How are we going to do that? And the idea of giving ourselves the empowerment and the advocacy that we necessarily need to navigate the system, because it's a system that we really don't know that much about. So if you can, if you want to explain your personal situation and then which route you chose to go down, and I'm just going to make some notes on the board so that people can make notes later on at home as well, and also take screenshots while they're watching, or scroll back and see what your options are. Tahirah, any options? Your educational options for children, anywhere from the age of 3 to the age of 21, because if they're
I think just important, really important, use your intuition. You know, understand if there is a challenge, if you're being challenged, if your child is being challenged, think about it, you know, think about their future, think about yourselves, and really understand that it's okay for it not to feel normal. So I think the biggest thing is identification, you know, building rapport with yourself, with the child, and working with your intuition.
What do you do if there's a language barrier?
And then you get help.
Okay.
You know, there is help available. It's not like we're living in the 80s when children would become the interpreters for their parents, but nowadays we have got access to interpretation. Schools are much better with getting people, you know, they've got language line, or they have other teachers who do speak the language. So really know that you have resources available.
I think the communities are a lot more diverse than they used to.
Absolutely.
Language is just still a massive barrier, though. I'd still like to add that in. We speak over 120, is it, languages now in the UK? And that is a lot of language. And often still, too often, we still haven't learned from Victoria Climbier cases and recent such cases of baby P and other such cases that have recently happened where things go amiss. Like, I know these are severe abuser cases and children have died in the process, but things can't get articulated properly. You've got a family now that have come from abroad, say, they have a child that has those additional needs, and you can't get an interpreter, that child's going to miss out.
Yeah.
The child's going to miss out. The needs of that child will not be articulate. They're not going to be understood in school. The language barrier then that child has in school to communicate their needs, you know, then you'll get, you know, that social, that, you know, their well-being, their mental health well-being will kind of it will have an impact on that, the fact that they're not getting educated, they're not being able to fulfill their potential, you know, and there is that language barrier, you know, that this thing needs to be considered in this day and age, especially. It's massive, and we're still not doing, we should be doing more now. Even though we are in the 21st century, we should be doing more in terms of making sure we do reach these families, but we still have lots of hard to reach families, lots of families that are really missing out, again, because of that language barrier, and children that literally just get put into school and just don't understand it.
Yeah.
Our system is very old. I'm just talking about secular systems now, just a normal school down your road. Our system of learning is very, very old, and it's not been brought up to the 21st century, unfortunately. So it's not meeting the needs of pupils, whether English is the first language, unfortunately, as well, or English is their second language, or English isn't their language at all. We're not meeting the needs of pupils.
That was brought to light, and it was a bit more prominent with the benefit cap. When the benefit cap came into London, and a lot of people were moved out of London, and they were moved to places where they don't necessarily have access to their own communities in their own languages, it became a lot more apparent that a lot of cities did not have adequate translation services, and forms were being handed out to parents who, face value, looked like they spoke really good English, but then later on you realize that they did not speak English as well as you thought they did, and they're unable to communicate in the language that you're asking them to communicate in. And that's a thing. The EHCP form and also school application forms don't necessarily have the ability to deal with the needs of those children.
Yep, correct. This is the problem now. EHCP plans only come in English. I've never to this day seen an EHCP plan or even just the assessment plan or anything being done bilingually or in a different language to meet the needs of that child. Now, this is a right of a child, right? They've got right. UN rights say that a child has a right to education, right?
Yeah.
Where is the right? What are we doing? We're getting it wrong, and we're in the 21st century. So we're
And
letting a lot of children and families down.
But if we're getting it wrong, we need to be voicing that to the right people as well.
I think sometimes it's the idea that even if that person does speak a legible amount of English or write things in a legible level of English, even if they went through school in this country, and that's what I think Sabia is trying to say, even if they went through school in this country and they're Indigenous UK-born residents, some of them don't understand the language or the complexity of the language that are on these forms. The complexity of the language is what's also a barrier. Because some of these forms read as though you should be a medical professional in order to understand how to fill these things out in the first instance. And if you're giving that not necessarily to someone who was born here, who would say, okay, fine, I'll take this to the Citizens Advice Bureau, which is where you should go in this case. But then it's the idea that if you don't know how to go to Citizens Advice, what do? You've been moved out of London into a new location, and you're told either put your child in school, home educate your child, or they go to an SEN school. And some people they don't even have the ability to fight for an SEN school. They don't know that they can withdraw their children and say, do you know what, leave it, I'll deal with this myself. They don't have that option because they don't know what they're doing. And that means a lot of things need to pop up in various places to deal with individualized communities, but also individualized cases. And there's not enough people out there to do that, number one. So our main options that we've got in this country are mainstream, which every parent will tell you is crumbling. Just like, we don't even know what that is at the moment. You have home education. And from the cases we've seen recently, Himayah and I also run the Muslim Alternative Education Advocacy Group. Some of the cases we've seen out of there recently where it comes to home education and SEN and local education authorities overstepping the mark, doing all sorts of random things, and people don't actually know the system that they're in order to be able to navigate the system that they're in. And it's learning the system which is the best thing for you and your children. Or we have special schools. So we have special educational needs schools. Anyone used any of these provisions? Do you want to start? Himayah, do you want to go first?
Yeah, but obviously I'm a home educator. To be honest, I think, when my son's always been under NHS care. He's been since he was 5 months. He was referred, and I had all the provision he could get until he was 5. And obviously, when he turns 5, it's that kind of okay, what you want to do with him. And for me, because all my other children were home educated, I did actually put him in a I thought, for me, I'm one of those people who what's the harm in trying? I don't have issues with these things. So everyone was like, oh, he'll benefit from being in nursery, and it was only 2 minutes down the road from me, and it was a state nursery. So I was like, okay, why not? He was there 18 months, and honestly, it was a waste of 18 months of my life, and it was just, for me, it was, I don't know why he was there. Sorry, my phone just fell. 18 months he was there, and it was just a waste of time. He was obviously, he was at that time, he was 3.5. He didn't have autism diagnosis. Obviously, we knew he had autistic features, but he didn't have a diagnosis of autism. So he was quite, I don't know what the politically correct word is, but he was socially awkward. So he wouldn't really play with any of the children. He would just stick to the adults sometimes, or, he was non-verbal anyway at that time. So, I did try state schooling, but for me, home education has always been, mainstream schools not an option. Actually, I did think about, to be honest, I did think about all of them. Like I said, he was in mainstream nursery, but for me, because he's got twofold, he's obviously got his learning difficulties, but he's got a physical disability as well. It's mild, it's not major, but and none of the schools could accommodate for that. So I did inquire. I did kind of ask around, ask his workers what provisions do they have, because he couldn't, he has difficulty walking. But it was like, there was no reassurance for me. And for me, because my other children are home educated, it was, why not? And I'm still here. He is year 7. Well, he's just finishing year 7, but he's not working to a year 7 standard. He's working more to a year 4, year 5 standard, and his severe needs aren't as severe, so he's kind of like in the middle. He's not severe enough for a special school, but I think he's not. I don't believe he will be able to cope in a mainstream school, so he's kind of somewhere in the middle. So for me, there was no other option other than home education for him.
Okay. Sabia, do you want to go next? Your lovely journey with education.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's my journey started with my now 14-year-old. So went to nursery, had all her checks, everything was fine. She was hyperlexic, or kind of going above and beyond her abilities when she had her assessments when she was a young child. Then went into nursery. Again, they seemed to have no problem with anything and said that everything was fine. Cut a long story short, she goes into primary school, and oh my goodness gracious me. See, with my daughter though, she had traits of being neurodiverse, but she was on steroids. So the medication, and if you doctor will know, Sarah, steroids are the devil's pill. Let's put it frankly, right? And she was on 60 mg at the age of 3 years old, right, to suppress her immune system. But steroids are, they're awful. They mess around with they mess around with your sleep. They mess around with your behavior. They mess around with your kind of, make you really hyperactive. They're just horrible, right? So
Yeah.
you can understand why me as a mother thought it's just the prednisone, it's just the steroids that are doing, and as a nurse as well. So I'm like, it's the steroids. It's the steroids that are doing this to my child. And she was on them. So from age 3, she it was really complex what was going on with my daughter, in terms of her medical condition. And it wasn't until she got to the age of kind of 5, we weaned her down to a very low dose. And the low dose was like 5 mg every other day. It was kind of like just kind of keeping it on her tiptoes and doing what it needed to do to the immune system for this short period of time. But my daughter had still a lot of traits, and I'm like, something's not right here. I think she's quite, well, at that time it was Asperger's, so I was like, I think my child has Asperger's. Oh my goodness gracious me, when I said that to family, they're like, why do you want to give her another medical condition? Why would you want to do this to your child? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. In matter of fact, I want to empower myself enough to know that if my child has this, how I'm going to manage my child and help my child thrive. This is why I need to know, is it just in my head, or does she actually have these traits? Because my daughter from day one has never slept, right? She absolutely hated, I mean, we can do this on another topic, Sarah, so I'm actually not going to go into detail. So we won't go into detail, but there were signs there from the beginning. But anyway, she went into secular school from nursery. Now, my daughter's always been quite authoritarian, so she likes playing the boss, right, as it were, right?
Oh, yeah.
Again, you just think, oh, it's fine. She likes putting everybody in their place and being the teacher, and nothing of it. She got into primary school. First kind of 6 months was okay, but then the teacher was absent, and that just really knocked her. And the teacher came back, and there's a bit of shift, and then that I could just see my child was just, it just wasn't happening. They like went in, they're like, oh, she's not learning like to the age expected targets then. Her reading, her writing, everything, they were just like, and at this point as well, my daughter had been in and out of hospital. Her medical condition severely deteriorated. She went into year 2, they changed the teacher. First they said she was having one teacher, and by this time my daughter was refusing to go to school. Like, school avoidance was at its highest at this point. I was already struggling. Like, I was like, as soon as she's getting home, because halfway through year 1, as soon as my child was getting home, she was exploding, like that Coke bottle is simmering away at school. They're trying to mask it as girls do. And at home, she was a completely different child. She was having massive meltdowns, to the point where, like, I was having bite marks, right? It was horrendous. And by the time I got to year 2, and I seen the state of my daughter, and I was pulling up at school at 10 o'clock trying to get my child into school, leaving her in tears, I thought, can't do this. This is not right. There's something that's not right. I initiated a referral to the pediatrician, and then school were like, oh, there's nothing. And I'm like, no, I need to speak to the Senko. Senko's like, oh, no, there's nothing. She'll be fine. Everything will be fine. She's completely fine in school, like they do. I was like, no, it's not, because at home, it's a completely different story. It's like, I
And
hate
you
to
get
say
it, but
this
it sounds
word,
like
but
that's what you do.
it's like a Jekyll and Hyde,
Yeah.
you get this kind of twofold child that, what they're seeing in school is what they assume the child is like at home. But it's really not the case, because that child has masked all day, anxiety levels high, adrenaline running high. And as soon as they get into the comfort zone, they're with their parents or they're in the comfort zone at home,
Absolutely
the
lose it.
mask drops, they completely lose it. And this was what was happening to my daughter. Cut a long story short, I said to the school, of like, enough is enough. Like, literally, use like are not getting me. You're not hearing the parent's voice. They do try and do this parent blame thing, which I absolutely hate. They're like, do you want to try this parenting program? Maybe it's just the way like your stuff is at home. No, 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 no. I am not having any of that rubbish, right? Then the head teacher had the audacity to turn around and say, when I told them that I think she might be on the spectrum, everybody's a little bit autistic, don't you think? You think?
Sorry, I
I
had to
was
laugh
just
out
like,
loud.
you what?
Yeah, all
I was like, what? At the time I was just like, a
Maybe
little
you've
bit
seen that,
autistic, a
Yeah.
little bit
SubhanAllah.
autistic woman. Anyways, I got
It's
her
the
out of that school, and
patronizing. It's the patronizing for me.
Yeah,
patronizing, isn't it?
absolutely.
And the
So
and
patronized
they've been
patronizing.
saying it for
parents,
years as
yeah.
well.
This was quite an elderly woman as well, so I was like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But they patronize parents, and they ambush parents to make them kind of feel like it's a parenting issue. It's a behavioral issue. It's all in your head, your parent. You shouldn't be going with your gut instinct. We know best. We see her in school. This is what they make you feel like as a parent. And it's not stopped. This is not changed. I hear parents every
No,
day
it
telling me
hasn't.
the
Yep.
story, right?
Yep.
And then I got to the pediatrician, and he's like, if you just, and the thing is, she just turned 6. So here in Manchester, if you see a pediatrician under the age of 6, before the 6th birthday, they can diagnose you. They used to be able to diagnose you with autism on that first assessment. But what happens after the age of 6? They have to refer you to CAMS. And which is obviously, we all know, lovely CAMS is a long waiting process. But at that time, it was about a year. I'm one of those parents. I was like, I am not waiting a year. I was the parent that was, I know my rights. My child is going to be seen to now, because this is affecting us so much. I am not going to let one day pass over. So I was a parent ringing every single day, every other day. Have you got any cancellations? Any cancellations? Because by this time she was home with me, right? Anyways, she got diagnosed within 6 months. She had an ADOS. We went in, everything was done. And then we went. I remember so clearly, after all the assessments were done, going in, and the practitioner turned around and says, yeah, you know your daughter's autistic. She's on the spectrum. It was so much relief for me. But on the other hand, it wasn't relief for the family. It was just like, oh my goodness.
It's something
And
else.
I remember that feeling, that I felt empowered now, that, okay, my daughter's autistic. And I knew this from the beginning, but I have it on a piece of paper now. I can
I
move
think,
forward with it now, and I
yeah,
can do something. And I know, I now need to now empower myself with knowledge and help my child through life and navigate it and empower her as an adult to be. And that was my journey. So from there, it went to home educating. We were home educating for quite a while. And from there, what was established is that my daughter needed, now with home education, yes, you can be very, very strict, or you can be very lax. You can, take it easy, take it every day at a time. My daughter needs strict routine. But she can't do strict routine in the home. Home is her complete comfort zone, where she switches off and she doesn't want to think about education and it still is to this day. So I got to a certain point where she wasn't thriving, and I know she could do better. I came across, there was another sister that suggested, well, there's an Islamic school that has just opened, small classes, everything like that, you know, a little private school, independent school, sorry, not private, because the reason why they wanted to be independent and not private is so they could keep costs lower for parents. So we went and had a look at the school. It ticked every box. The teachers, the way you enter, the whole grounds, the classroom, the way everything was, it was like a home from home. And my daughter has never left that place, by the way. So she joined in year 3, and she's thrived. She's now going to start her GCSEs next year, because it goes from a primary then to a segregated high school. So boys are completely off site, girls have remained on the primary school site because that's where the facilities are for the high school. And she's thrived without any CP plan. She didn't need one in the end, because school were meeting her needs purely because teachers had time. There's 12 children in a class. They had the time and they could put the effort in to my child, even when my daughter has been in hospital, to make the effort with her. And this is what made the difference. It made all the difference that teachers put the time, effort into my child to help her thrive. Even now, I can text the head teacher directly and tell them that we're having a bad morning. We're going to be late. You know, I'm sorry, you know, and that's it. She will let everybody know that Libra's going to be late. No questions asked. Libra can go in. Everything's fine. And this is the type of relationship we have. But this is not, you know, this is because
That's
of
a rarity, isn't it, though?
I was just about to say that,
rarity,
actually.
yeah.
It's not something, I mean, I'm in London and we've got a number of Islamic schools where I live. I'm in, you know, the heart of East London, and not a single one of them can cater for SEND children. So the model that the sisters are speaking about, I'm just imagining it here.
It's a unicorn. No, it is. And she knows that. I know that. We've spoke about
The unicorn, yeah.
We know
It
it's a
literally is.
unicorn.
Yeah.
You know, if there was something like that here, it would be amazing, because we
But
have
it isn't a unicorn. It's a unicorn. It's a unicorn now.
Yeah.
But we're trying to
Well,
make
it
sure
shouldn't
that it's
be.
not a
It shouldn't
unicorn.
be. It
We're
shouldn't be.
trying to
This
make
is what we need
sure
across border, and this is what we need to
Absolutely.
fight for. We need to fight for,
Absolutely.
not even fight. That we need this model. This should be in every school. It
But then
shouldn't
that
be
brings you
that
back,
we
doesn't that
have
bring you
this.
back to the economic problem?
Exactly, because I remember making the phone call to school, and I went and I said to the Kamal Uddin is the head teacher, and I remember saying to him that, brother, my child is autistic, right? And he goes, look, if we take her on, she's the first SEND child we will take on. I said, look, at this point I was in tears, I'll be honest with you. I said, give my daughter a chance. If you don't give my daughter a chance, give her a chance. Honestly, give her a chance. We've never looked back. They've never looked back. And in fact, it empowered them to take more SEN children on. And yes, there have been children that they've took on and thought, right, okay, we can only go so far. And they have had to go to specialist provision, but they didn't say no. And this is the beauty of it. They tried and tried. They done what they could. And it got to a certain point where they did have to say to a very few parents that, look, we have tried, but it is probably best that your child does move to a different provision where they can cater for the needs a bit more. But these then children were on a different, you know, obviously it's a broad spectrum, you know, and their needs were very different. But this school, hand on heart, it is a gem. It is a gem, and it is a very, very big rarity, like you're saying. But why is it a rarity? Why is it that our
But then one of the
it is
problems we have to think about when we talk about the idea of it being a rarity is the economic power that the Muslim community does not hold. Coming from a community where I'm a revert, it's coming from a community where money was the foundation. Yeah, you had religion, but you had money, and the money was spent to make sure that those people who needed it flourished. I think the Muslim community it's not a homogeneously race society. So even in the homogeneously race like Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Indian subcontinental, it's not that the money's not there. It's just the money's not used properly.
You know, here, the schools here, they're very expensive, Islamic schools. So for me, it makes me
Yeah.
wonder, you know, there is enough money. I believe that there is, you know,
There
some
is.
sisters I know, they've got multiple children in Islamic schools, the same one of the top ones. So the schools are receiving the money, but it just makes you wonder, where is it all going? I mean, there's one SEND school I know of, which the child is apparently doing very well, but the rest of them, they all accept, they will say, yeah, we'll take SEND children, etc. But then shortly after, these are the Islamic ones, they're like, no, we can't cater for your child. So for me, if I'm honest, I just see a lot of it, you know, as a business. You know, we're getting your money, we'll take your
Yeah.
money, because
These are
it's very
the
expensive here.
private run schools, sister. So there's a difference, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. And
They're the
your one is,
private, yeah. This is an
yeah,
independent one. Put it this way, right? I'll give you an example of how much these children mean to the head teachers. Now, we've just had half term. The head teacher of the school gave birth on the Friday that half term started. And you know when that head teacher went back into school? Because of the passion and the drive that she has for her children in that school. She went in back on Monday. She took a week off and she went back in. The Molana that helps her husband that helps her run the school, same passion and drive. It's down to the individual.
yeah.
They said this from the beginning. Our drive is not the dunya. Our drive is the akhirah.
Yeah,
You know, if
see,
you
now
want your child to
that's the
be
difference, isn't it?
yeah,
That's a big difference.
if you want your children to be academically brilliant and get 20 GCSEs and you want them to be academic and be for the dunya, then don't send them here. If you want them to thrive for the akhirah, this is the place to be. And for me, the akhirah is the
Don't
most
work out here.
important place.
Absolutely, yeah,
See,
absolutely.
that's the difference. The difference then is mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's Islamic schools where I've worked, and the goal and the mission, I didn't see the goal and the mission. There's no goal and mission. So there was nothing for you to step into and acclimatize to think, okay, we're aiming for this. What you get from Muslims is, even now, tutoring privately. Sometimes the majority of mums and dads who want me to tutor their children privately are like, yeah, by all means, that's the fee, paying it. We're done. But you have another layer of Muslims. Even if they have the academic funds, they don't particularly want to allocate it where it should be allocated. And they will say, it'll be fine, and it's probably a revert issue, but I've spoken to another revert who works for me, and she gets the same issue. They see your name, they will phone you. They don't know you're Muslim at first. They will be willing to pay the cost. A couple of lessons in, the kids are in your class, the majority of the class is Muslim. You say Salaamu alaikum at the beginning of the lesson. All of a sudden, they realize you're Muslim. You get a text message, you get a phone call. Oh, sister, I'm struggling financially.
Muslim pride.
Inshallah, please, sister, please, I'm struggling. I have no problem helping anyone that is actually struggling financially. I have no problem helping anyone that's struggling financially. Any of my parents will tell you, they've called me, they've given me a genuine concern. They've said, I really can't afford it right now. I've got like 4 or 5 kids. I just give me a couple of months. By all means, I will find another way. I will find a way for me to still be able to give your child top-notch education and be able to provide you with something else. But it's the idea of Muslims don't want to give each other the
They don't empower each other. They don't empower each other,
They don't
Sarah.
value each other.
They don't. And this is the problem within our communities, right? We have no unity. You know, if we had unity, we work with each other. Yeah.
When did we stop valuing education?
I don't know. Honestly, it's bad.
That's
But
a
when
point
did we
where
stop
we need to
valuing?
think about.
When did we stop valuing each other? That's sad. That
I think that
you as
stopped
an
when we stopped
educator,
valuing ourselves.
yeah,
We
it's
stopped
terrible.
valuing ourselves.
Yeah,
And stop valuing each other.
yeah.
Because essentially we're an ummah, right? So whatever you love for yourself, you love for your brother. If you don't want the best for yourself, you're not going to want the best for him or her. And until we're able to do that, it's not going to work, because it's sort of like you will go to another sister. Himayah has dealt with problems where we've sort of gone, okay, great, child's in mainstream school, may have SEN, may not have SEN. Have you considered home ed? Oh, but sister, that's a lot of work. You gave birth to this person. So whose work is it meant to be? you're not going to be operating in isolation. Find your community, find your tribe, and get on with life. But it's the idea that we seem to be our own roadblock. We seem to be standing in our own way. And because we're standing in our own way, that is problematic within itself. Here comes my child.
That was interesting that as well, what you just said. That was interesting. I attended Dr. Haifa Yunus's lecture last night, and she said we need to be a bit more present as a woman. Stand in your role for the sake of Allah, and this is the thing. And she talked about education, right? A question was posed: is that, you know, how do we do right by our children and they still turn out not the way we wanted them to? So she talked about from the beginning. And so it's setting the goal. What is our ultimate goal? Whether we have an SEN child or not, what is our ultimate goal and purpose on this dunya? It begins with intention, right? It begins with intention. And if your intention is right and you know what your purpose is on this dunya, it's to get to Jannah, right?
Yeah.
If you live by that, and you believe and you know that everything that you hear, see, and feel should be for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you know that that's going to get you to Jannah, right? Pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because everything is an act of worship. Then be present. Whether it's in your role as being a mother, be present. Be present for your child in that role of being a mother. Whether you need to be an educator, whether you need to be that child's advocate, whether you need to, whatever it is, whatever capacity you're going to be that mother, but being present in that role, and be present to such an extent that it is satisfying and pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the ultimate goal is to get to Jannah. So we lose hindsight of this. We lose sight of this. Our ummah has lost sight of our purpose, and this is the problem.
And maybe we need to get, you know, where the school sends us for parenting classes, they blame us. You know, you're the one who's got separation anxiety. It's a child who's suffering, but the blame is constantly on us. That, you know, when the sister was saying about the teachers being patronizing, how about we teach the Muslim mothers how to be? You know, there's mothers who've given birth, they've got older kids. What worked for us? You know, where did we have that? If it's a work balance, like you said, we're the ones who bring these children into this world. It is for us to give them that, you know, the best in the world and the best for the akhirah, to teach them. So it's not just the teachers. And for the home ed, you know, mums, I think it's amazing that the majority of the mum that are home educating, the kids come out different. They're a different breed of kids.
They really are. Because
I think
have no filter.
Honestly, the schools, we send them to school and they're there for so many hours. Like somebody said, the system doesn't work. It hasn't changed for years and years. And then the kids come out and they're just robots.
You know,
Where's
Go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to add one of the things both the sisters touched upon is, you know, being there for your child. And I think that's key, because for me, obviously, home ed, I mean, Rachel, you know, as well, I'm not a fan of, you know, like, you know, I'm not a fan of schools. I don't find them beneficial at all. Obviously, what the sisters have said today is open my eyes and ears a little bit towards a different side of things. But in general, when there's people I speak to, I'm a full advocate of home education. I believe that everyone should at least try it. At the very least, just try it. But then I've got a friend who she'd love to home educate, but her husband won't allow it. But she's one of those mums. She's, you know, like you said, you have to be present in your children's lives. You can't be one of those mums who are, which I think in our Asian community, I'm not sure about other communities, but in our Asian community it is. And I know I've got family members like that. They don't take involvement in their children's lives. It is go to school, bring them home, go to madrasa, and that's it. You know, not how was your day and did you have any issues? And you know, they're not present parents. They're one of those, I suppose, passive parents. So you let the school do their job. And so when are you going to parent your child? You know, when are you going to be the mother to your child? You know, so I think it's really important, you know, that we are involved, whatever our setup is, whether if our children are in school or if they're at home, you know, we have to be involved parents, you know. And if I don't have the worry, a lot of mums come to me, my child this, my daughter this. I've got two adult daughters, and I don't have those worries that a lot of the parents come to me with, oh, what about this? And, you know, what about boys? And what about music? And, you know, I don't have any of of those words, alhamdulillah, because I think even if my children weren't home educated, I like to be involved in my children's lives. I'm probably one of those helicopter parents they call, with poking my nose in their business and, what you up to, not in a negative way, but like a positive. I like to know what my children are doing. It's not, I think it is in our community that they're not present in their children's lives. And, even with children with SEN, I've got a few family members who have got children with SEN, and I see very few of them actually involved in their children's lives, which I think,
it's making that effort, isn't it? It's that conscious effort. And I think for me, a lot of the question that I ask is the question that a lot of people ask is, why did you choose to go down the educational route that you did? Okay, for me, it was home education. And not only was it because, okay, fine, that's my background, that's where I came from, but it's also the idea of, okay, on that day, I have to stand before Allah. And I know all of I've seen all of the primary school teachers in my now 3 local primary schools. Yeah, no. Because there's going to be that disconnect between faith and education.
Yeah.
Going to be that great divide and that great disconnect. Because if you've got a SEN child, the world is already not set up for you. Yeah? But for you to go into a system where they tell you, it's okay, today you can be a boy in the morning, then a girl in the afternoon. And then you don't have to be either in the evening. But then when you go to bed and you wake up tomorrow morning, decide for yourself at 6 a.m. what you're going to be today. Yeah. And in that way, you can wear whatever uniform you want to wear. Tell your mom that if she decides that she's not going to buy you a gingham dress during the summer, that she's against your rights and she's stifling your creativity and she's not allowing you to be who you want to be. And then you end up with prevent and all sorts of madness at your doorstep. I needed him to understand that, mate, you're a young man. Okay. First and foremost, sometimes when he has his odd meltdown or whatever, I go, imagine if, let's do a what if scenario, because it works really well with him. So let's see how this plays out. Yeah. And let's see how rational you could possibly be. You are acting as though you are crazy. Yeah. Let's just put it in a normal nutshell. Right? I say this to my kids. My kids understand sarcasm fluently now. It's fine. You are acting slightly crazy. So imagine if, when you grow up and you become a dad, that you act exactly as you are acting now. So look at your dad and go, if dad acted like the way I am acting now, how would I feel? Because most children on the autistic spectrum don't understand how other people feel. So you've got to guide them down that route. And he went, first of all, dad's really big. So if he decides to throw himself on the floor, he might either hurt himself, or he's going to hurt somebody else, or he's going to break something. Okay, great. How would the people around him feel? Confused. Why would they be confused? Because he's a grown man throwing himself on the floor. Okay, you're 7. In 10 years' time, what are you going to be? A grown man. So do we want to practice now that we don't do that, or do we want to get into the habit of doing it? And he goes, oh, do you know, let's get up. I'm getting up. I'm up. Can we drink? Can I have some water? And then we start all over again. And I think with home education, I've got that ability to take that time with him. Much like Sabia's daughter in school, because it is a small school, because it is independent of the state control in that way, the teachers have the ability to be that secondary parent. If you put them into mainstream school, you've got 30 children in a class, going up to 32 to 35 now, because there's a teacher shortage. Your SEN child, unless you go down that route of an EHCP and their needs are severe enough for you to be able to get that extra funding, you are unable to get your child that specialist care that they need. I would better off my child being in a ratio of 1 to 5 with his siblings, or 1 to 4 with his siblings, than being in a ratio of 1 to 35 and having that same meltdown.
Well, the ratio doesn't make sense to me anyway. The 1 to 12 ratio is still kind of doable. The sister mentioned in the independent school, that's still a doable ratio, but where the 1 to, as you're saying, 30, 35, it's, even with a TA, it's a lot of work for 1 or 2 people.
But then now it's not a TA in terms of they will hire a TA, but that TA is not just for your autistic child. And that is what a lot of parents are not seeing. That, having been in that role, Sometimes you have a TA in the class, which is a teaching assistant in the class. We're going to break down all the acronyms as well as we go along. You can have that person in the class, which they say is attributed for your child for their SEN program. But then you've also got a child who has hearing loss, and you have a child who may have medication that they need to take for a physical ailment. You may have another child who is on the autistic spectrum, but slightly more severe. You may have a child on an autistic spectrum that is slightly less severe than your child. And that TA is there for all of those 5 children. So that one TA is trying now to deal with SEN children. The teacher in the class thinks that that TA is for her or for him, and they've got the TA doing photocopying, and your child is left behind. It's one of those things where I think parents, when it comes to education, even though you've got these 3 options, you also have the option of flexi schooling. And if a school cannot meet your needs, the 4th option is that they go to school or their SEN provision or wherever part-time. You do have to get the school to agree to that, but it's more than likely that they will agree once your child has started going down the route of school refusal. Because it's better to have no funding. It's better to have some funding than no funding at all. And that's when the EHCP funding will plug the gap of your child not being on site all times.
It all boils down to funding. Let's just be honest with it. It all boils down to money and resources and what the school are willing to put into it. Now there's a crisis with teachers, like you've just touched upon, right? Teachers don't want to be teachers anymore because they're overworked and underpaid, right? We've got that crisis that we're hitting. And this is not new, that they've known this for a while, that teachers are so under pressure and this was going to happen. It's the same with the NHS. Nobody wants to work for the NHS now. They've cracked them. They've cracked the nurses, the doctors, everybody that kind of has tried to keep the NHS together. They've broke them. They've broke them because they've not looked after their well-being. They've not looked after them as individuals. And you've got a broken system. So until the system fixes at that level, the system will always, they won't give our children justice. They won't give the children what they need. They will always, I'm looking for the term, but it's just not coming to my tongue.
It's all profit driven though.
It's not gonna, they're just not gonna give our children what they need, basically, because the system is broken so much.
Then that's
It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get
problem of the policy of no child left behind. They seem to have forgotten the SEN
They
kids.
forgot all the policies. Yeah, they just had the review last year, March 2023. What happened to
wasn't
that?
working then. But they're still pumping more money into it.
Yeah, I mean, the review that took place last year now, special educational needs and disabilities and alternative provision, right? Improvement plan that they put in place, the right support, right place, right time. The March 2023 one, it's 100 odd pages. That is supposed to outline exactly what is supposed to be happening within this, right? What's happened to it? What's going on with it? This is supposed to be like for the next 3-4 years. What's going on?
We've changed government now. So
exactly.
They're going to write it all over again. It's fine. They're going to write it all over again.
Yeah.
So in that time, they would have lost a whole cohort of SEN.
Yeah. And that's it. It's gone kapoof, hasn't it? So we're letting our children down on such a massive scale. That was supposed to, the rights of a children, fulfill children's potential. Are we doing that? We're not fulfilling our children's potential. Yeah, are they enjoying childhood? Are they achieving? I'm reading this document to you because I want people to know what this is, right? It's accessible. I will share the link. People can have a read of it.
Link it
Enjoy the childhood.
in the chat, and I'll put it in the bottom of this.
Yeah, and are well prepared for childhood and in employment. Are they giving that to our children? Build parents' trust. They've broke it so badly. Parents and carers experience a fairer, easier,
there is a big farewell. There is a big farewell from mainstream, isn't there?
And are they giving that?
A lot more city councils are now actually getting more applications from parents who have children in SEN provisions to actually pull them out and home educate them themselves. Because the idea that Sabia's daughter's school is a unicorn, right? And what's happening is that we need to form more unicorns so unicorns become normal. If you can't educate your child at home, even if you can't educate your child at home, or you need more of input from someone else to help you educate your child, we're looking at, it's going to have to be a home education basis provision, which then you have a top up of all the extra people that you're paying for on top of that. It's not going to be a top-down approach. It's going to have to be a grassroots and up sort of idea. You're the one who holds the children. At the end of the day, if your child fails in school and they are aware enough, they know that by the way the law is written, you are responsible for their education. So I'm going to give your responsibility to, I've given my responsibility to someone else, and that person is not fulfilling the rights of my child. Who's then at fault? So not only am I at fault with my child, not only am I then feeling a sense of mum guilt, I am then liable by law, but you're telling me to send my child to school. It's really one of those double-edged swords, isn't it? And this is not a part, like an advocation for home education. It's an option, but it's also the idea that you need to empower yourself and have enough passion and have enough voice with your children. And we cannot parent our children the way our parents parented us. Quite a lot of parents, especially I've spoken to quite a lot of Indian subcontinental parents and African parents, it was go to school and do what the teacher tells you to do. But now the teacher is telling you to do something which is completely opposite from what your parents are telling you to do at home. And then parents are like, oh, but you're not listening. Oh, and then they go to the imam, my child is not listening to me. What do I do with my child? Brother or sister, who is teaching your child? I don't know. When's the last time you attended parents' evening? I don't know. I bought them the uniform, I bought them the revision guides, and I sent them to school.
I think also there's also this culture of, it's not my child, everyone else is at fault but me.
Yeah.
As a parent, my brother, he works he's a teacher, and he was telling me about a parents' evening once, or was it, I think, entry to college or whatever, and the parents just absolutely in denial that my brother's like, no, your son is the problem, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, and they're, no, it's not my child, it's you, it's this denial that it's not me, it's you.
But that was the reason I pulled out of teaching, was the idea that I phoned a parent and I said to her, your child is misbehaving in all lessons. You need to speak to him because he's on the verge of being expelled, and they're not going to warn you before they expel him because they've had so many problems with him in the past. They're not going to warn you before they expel him. The parent turned around and said to me as the professional, I'm telling you, it's your child. Telling me it's not my problem. He's your problem for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
He's my problem. Since when was he my problem? So I'm paying childcare to deal with your problem. I'm paying someone to take care of my child so I can deal with your child. I'm trying to help you, empower you to go ahead and say something to teachers, like maybe he needs a diagnosis of some description, because if he's getting in trouble in every single lesson, this is a problem that needs sorting. And you're telling me, well, he doesn't want to be there anyway, but they said that he has to go to school. So if he has to go to school, then he's your problem for 6 hours a day. That day I put down the phone, and it was July time. I remember very specifically, it was July time. I already said to my husband, do you know what? I'm not going back into schools. I'm going to do a year. I'm going to see off my year 11s, and then I'm going to be done. Because my year 10s going into year 11s, I loved them. But that phone call solidified everything for me. I handed in my resignation letter and I said, I'm very sorry, I am not returning next year. I am not returning next year. And I was the only ethnic minority and Muslim member of staff. So for them, that looks really bad, right? And it also looks like the cohort of children that come in that look like me are not getting a satisfactory education because nobody looks like them. But then it means that we've seen it, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Stamford Hill, Stoke Newington has had this flux of parents saying, okay, my child's in an SEN school, but he or she is not progressing. My child is in a mainstream school and they're not meeting my child's needs. This is the phone calls we get every single day. So then if those are your options and they're not meeting your child's needs, what's your third option? What's your fourth option? And I think Muslims need to start valuing ourselves and looking outside of the box about how we're going to deal with our children. A lot of people fear, okay, yeah, I've had parents where they said, I've got really, really great education from back home. I have a PhD, but my English is not that great. Okay, what means that you have to teach any subject in English apart from English?
Yeah.
And that was like a light bulb moment to a parent I spoke to. It was like, your maths skills are better than your child's maths teacher because you're telling your child's maths teacher that the book is marked incorrectly, right? but you are concerned that you don't have the grammatical English. Well, then farm that bit out. Farm that bit out. Don't farm out everything because you are insecure about your English needs, or go ahead and take a class. It's not that hard.
Well, I think this is what we do at the Muslim Alternative Education Advocacy, isn't it? It's we kind of help mums specifically overcome these kind of obstacles. That, you know, the kind of obstacles that people are saying, I've got this issue, I've got that issue. Most of the issues that I've come across are from parents and their own issues as such. You know,
Parents
it
are
is like
standing, that's the
language
whole thing,
barrier.
they're standing in their own way. They're being
Yeah.
their own barrier.
Yeah, I mean, I speak to mums, and you know, it's like I know sisters who English isn't their first language, but their children have gone and got degrees. So, and they were home educated. So, you know, or they've got really strong, you know, accents, or you know, and it surprises me because you know, I spoke to another sister the other day. I didn't even know she's a pharmacist, and her accent is so strong.
Yep.
You know, it's very deep. You have to kind of really listen to it. She goes, no, she's from a different country. She's like, no, from back home. I was a pharmacist and I was just gobsmacked. You know, so it's like just because she does have that English language barrier, but then I'm just like, go and take some lessons. And if you feel that that's the only thing, that is the only reason that you can't engage on this in this path, then overcome that. You know, take some English lessons until you feel you're more that you can. And we need, like you said, it's about empowering parents. We've been made to feel inadequate. We can't do these things, but we absolutely
can't do
can.
anything because we're listening to the government a bit too much about how Muslim women don't speak English and we don't do anything. That was the best article I've ever read. Muslim women don't speak English. That was the best article I have ever read in English aimed at people who speak English. They seem to be dealing with the situations that they have as though we are an immigrant population.
Yeah.
And the majority
I
of
just
us
think
were born
things
here.
haven't changed. You
It's
know,
that's the whole thing, isn't it?
my kids are now late teenagers. The oldest is 21, 22. And it just feels like things haven't changed from back then, you know, just screaming at the teachers, telling them there's something wrong, they putting me into parenting classes and telling me that I've got separation anxiety because I'm so concerned about my children's needs. It just feels like, you know, things have not changed over the years.
I don't think things have changed because the community hasn't done anything for things to
Yeah,
change.
no.
And that's because we joined the system wholeheartedly. And now we're thinking, okay, it's really funny like how far removed we are from our own cultures.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have children now who they're Indian subcontinental, but they don't speak the language. And that, I think that removes a layer of what we would consider something as a barrier, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Because it means a part of your brain that should have been working is not working because you're not bilingual.
Absolutely.
And those sorts of thoughts and feelings and the idea that as a Muslim anyway, you're othered. You're othered in a society that you think you belong to. And now you're SEN and you're being othered in the community that you're SEN from. You go to school, you're still othered, especially if you're in mainstream. But then special educational needs schools, unless it is an autism specific school, have an issue if they're dealing with children with hypermobility issues, they're dealing with children who have Down syndrome. Not one size doesn't fit all. So how are you dealing with this one size fits all model? Because that's the model that we've taken. Okay, these children are a bit too special for mainstream, so we're going to put them into special educational needs, but then they're not special enough for it to be an individualized sort of idea of how they get through life. Everyone's going to learn how to do photocopying. Everyone's going to learn how to chop a cucumber. Like, really, these are things that you should have the ability to do. Yes, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to photocopy, but I'm not training or giving you my child so my child can be a clerk. That's not what I sent them to you for. And I think that's a big question, isn't it? We have to question why we're sending them. And that all comes down to an idea of intention. But looking at a lot of the policies that are coming out now for SEN children, do you see a conflict between the system and us practicing our faith within the system? Do you see a problem? Or is there a problem? Or am I just seeing a problem that doesn't exist? Is there a problem within the system and us practicing our faith within that system?
In terms of the education system,
The
well,
education
I mean,
system, in terms of children with SEN in the education system.
I don't know if I don't know, to be honest. I think it's hard. It's a hard one, you know. I mean, my kid, maybe the other sisters could contribute for me because he's not there. For me, I kind of like, I don't know, to be honest. Maybe the other sisters can add
Is that
something
why
to
you
that.
choose? But is that one of the reasons you choose to operate outside of the system?
The thing is, I think that the curriculum is so confusing, especially with the the RSE movement as well now. For me, it's very my son doesn't understand, so I don't want him to come home confused and answer questions. Have to it's hard enough him understanding life, for example, firstly, and then things like I'm trying to instill the importance of salah and everything else, and then there's just like confusion about identity. Am I this? Am I that? Am I there? Am I there? For me, it's just a whole. I don't know. For me, it's just a whole conflict, a complete conflict. I don't know how other families deal with these kind of issues. I really don't understand. I find it really difficult.
I think it's the idea of it's a difficulty regardless, right? Parenting an SEN child has more difficulties than anything else.
Yeah.
Than anyone else. And I think that's mine that's just ran through sort of like told him to stay upstairs. Yeah, he has a thing about rice at the moment. We're not really sure what it is. He eats an abundance of rice. It's just I've given up on him right now.
My son's the same, don't worry. He loves his rice.
How do you eat so much food, right, and not gain any weight? Like, what is could you give me the secret? Like, I'm trying to get him to give me the secret. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but okay. That's his answer to everything. I have no idea what you're talking about, but okay. But it's one of those things where it's just really hard for you to be able to navigate the system, maintain your faith, empower yourself in order to be able to maintain your faith, and then operate in a system that just wants to, how do I put it without it sounding really odd, strip you of your faith. Because
it's hard one. I think for me, because it's obviously it's everything for me. As I said from the beginning, I've always been involved in my children's life, and for me, everything is. I see all kinds of behaviors coming out from school, and a lot of the behaviors are learned behaviors. I don't have. For me, I see a lot of it is learned behaviors. Things like swearing. I mean, some people may think these are minor issues, but it's a huge conflict with our deen. We don't. Swearing, nobody says something that the Muslim does not curse, the Muslim doesn't swear. So, for me, it's the smaller things as well. I just don't see any benefits. I mean, for me, it's very difficult to reconcile the fact my child is in a non-Islamic environment. Although where I am, there are a lot of Muslims there, but I think because everyone's on a different perhaps level of understanding of the deen. Some people are perhaps, well, this doesn't matter so much, that doesn't matter so much. So for me, I think it's just one of those things. I'm just like, it's hard enough. I'm finding it hard enough with him as it is. I don't need an extra issue on top to have to deal with or have to undo with him.
And that's an issue though, isn't it? Tahirah, how did you manage it as an adult?
No, I think even with hindsight with my own children, looking back, I think there's so many things that I would have done differently. If I had a choice to homeschool all three of them, I would have done. I homeschooled the youngest one because I knew what the other two had gone through.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as an adult, it's hard because you have teachers saying, oh, it's because English is your second language. And I look at them and say, well, I was born here. What other language do you expect me to speak? And then they say arguments are like, well, you must think in your mother tongue language and you speak English. And I said, well, no, the majority of the time I'm even thinking in English because that's the language that I'm speaking the majority of the time. So it's things like that, and even getting so far in education and being told, oh, it really is because English is your second language, we really feel when you came from back home. And it's like, hang on a minute, I didn't come from back home.
The patronizing issue again, isn't it? Patronization.
Massively.
Is this the
Massively.
patronization?
And then when you go and complain, they say, well, it's a white populated profession, you're not going to get anywhere with it. So I was training to be a counselor and they tried to put me off it and saying it's a white profession, don't bother going through with it. So actually I did the opposite.
I think when you're that sort of I think dyslexia in total, right, gives you an extra layer of stubborn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm dyslexic, and I've realized how stubborn I am, because it's the idea that because my parents, like the dyslexia, they gave me all sorts of tools to deal with it, and I didn't actually realize the way they taught me. I didn't actually realize I was dyslexic until I hit university. So that's the whole thing about late diagnosis. But we're dialing Sabia in, on the basis that her computer does not like her. But she's on mute at the moment, I think. Yes, she is. She's muted herself. Not my doing. I didn't do it. I'm nice.
The computer doesn't like me. Just keeps on saying preparing meeting.
Her computer wants her to prepare, but she was the first one here. It was you two that needed preparing. Just had
Sorry.
to put that in there. I had to throw it in. Muslims and the lack of timekeeping.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's the idea that I think it's one of those issues of when you've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and then autism on top of it. And I think if it was genetically anyone that it came from, it's probably me. And I have a feeling it is me, because I see the world very differently. Sort of road rage. I don't get it. Like, why are you so angry so early in the morning? Hey, if you don't want to go to work, don't go. Like, why are you shouting and screaming at people? Or someone cuts you off in the middle of the road and they sort of like, they've cut you off, but they swear at you. And I'm sort of, I sit there for a while and I'm sort of like,
Common sense.
really, I don't comprehend what that was the reaction for, because it wasn't necessary. So even when my kids are arguing, I say things to them like, was it necessary to say that to your brother? Or was it necessary to say that to your sister? Does it make you feel any better? And they sort of go, well, no, not really. But why did you say it like that? Then why do it? It still mind boggles me how people operate in the world. It probably is me. And having the dyslexia just adds that level of, okay, I can't do it that way because I find that difficult. I'm going to find another way to do it. And being able to be empowered enough to say, do you know what? You said I can't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do it anyway. If you said to me, I can't go through door A, well, there's 25 other letters in the alphabet. I'm just going to try another door.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like one of this, when I posted about this podcast and I said to someone, okay, fine, we're going to run this podcast. It's all about women's issues, but I'm going to start off with ASD because that seems to be a big problem that nobody's talking about. We need to speak about finances. We need to speak about dress code. We need to think about housing situations. We need to talk about all sorts of random things like intersectionality, the fact that a Muslim Bangladeshi has a problem with a Muslim from Pakistan, but if the British didn't get involved, you'd all be one set of people. It's all of those things we need to talk about, but I wanted to start with ASD because it's one of those things that's still being swept under the rug at a very quick rate, but it's affecting the next generation a lot faster than anything else. And sister came to me and she said, why would you want to do it? And I said to her, because I'm nosy.
Wow.
That was literally
a bit of an odd question to ask, isn't it? Why wouldn't you do it? Why not? You know,
because I want to be nosy.
Yeah.
We need to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to be more open. We need to have these awkward conversations because nobody's talking about them. The gap is getting wider. These things are getting worse because nobody's talking about them. Like you said, these things are getting swept under the carpet. The ummah is falling to pieces.
Well, I think a lot of our problems are still there because
that are affecting this ummah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you were saying about the Pakistani Bangladesh. I'm actually Pakistani. My husband's from Bangladesh.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. Because you.
Yeah, you know, you'd be surprised at the issues I faced 20 odd years ago when I got married. Some of the attitudes are still there, and you think 20 years on, people would have moved on, but they haven't. So
no, that's still going on now because
it's still there.
I'm watching a friend of mine who is Bangladeshi. The guy that she met in Pakistan, lovely guy. Her father's actual words were, yeah, great guy, great income, great family. They're just not one of us.
Yeah, you see, so we have to have these conversations, you know, that because I think there's not enough of it out there. You know, you have a lot of podcasts that are going on, but it's a lot jokey, but there's not enough. I think maybe it's a lot from the youth. I think we seem to be a bit older, all of us here. We seem to be a bit from a different generation to what the youth are out there. So inshallah, it'll be beneficial, and we will be able to have these discussions that, you know, maybe we didn't have the ability to discuss beforehand.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing is even like for us that were born and raised here and operated within the system, we see how much of the system didn't work for us, but is also not working for our children.
Yeah.
But we have the ability, because we know how,
Mm-hmm.
to do more than our parents did.
Yeah.
I come from a family of rebellious women. Like, oh, they're stubborn as hell. Right? And all of the men will tell you, marry a Lewis woman and you've got problems. Right? I think it's my grandma. It's her fault. Everything's my grandma's fault. She was stubborn.
And it's generational trauma.
It's generational. And I think it's the generational trauma of the fact that if you look at the men on my side of the family, they all have a slight amount of autistic traits that were never dealt with. They were never dealt with. And now that my son, and I'm aware of what's going on with him, I will say things. Like, just because you never dealt with it with your son doesn't mean I'm not going to deal with it with mine.
But you're creating the legacy in itself.
Exactly.
By speaking. It's not calling people out. You know, there's a difference between calling people out and creating the legacy. The difference is that you have got the voice, you've got the experience, you have the lived experience, you have the bigger lens to deal with it. And it's not just that you're calling it out or you're rebellious women, it's the fact that you're willing to make the change and go forward with a new legacy. Heal the generation of trauma that has gone before. So those men that didn't have the ability to speak up, you know, you're giving your son the tools to speak up.
He has, and he does not stop speaking.
Alhamdulillah, and it's not a bad thing, you know. I mean, I'm in my 40s now. I've got PTSD from the trauma that for me, it's coming back to me now. And my sister, because she's I don't even know what she's, a psychotherapist of some kind. And when I talk to her about it, because she's 10 years younger than me, but this is her profession. This is what she's big on social media. She's like, you know, I didn't realize this was kind of affecting you. Like this, it's the smallest of things that she's like, I didn't realize it. But for me, I never ever thought about it. For some reason, it's all coming back to me now in my 40s. All the trauma that I experienced when I was younger,
remember everything.
Growing up, I'm now experiencing feeling now.
It's generational trauma, isn't it?
Yeah.
It through generations and generations, and it gets carried until you wake up and realize that enough is enough. It's got to change.
Yeah.
And it's only through that recognition of that generational trauma that you've been carrying for so long, and through the generations, it's only through the recognition of that you can make the change.
Yeah.
And empower yourself enough to make to know what the changes need to be. And so long you'll learn along the way, because certain things that you might want to try and implement to make those changes and implement them changes, they take time, effort, and resilience.
That's the one thing that we need.
And this is the thing, you know, sometimes we fall at the first hurdle and we give up. But you need people around you that will make you also feel empowered. Like you shared, Sarah, that, you know, you said that you wanted to start this, and the sister said, well, why? That's not what you need around you. You need a positive attitude that, you know what, go ahead. What's the worst that can happen?
And it wasn't even a sister that I know personally. That was the worst thing. It wasn't even a sister I knew personally. Like my friendship group were like, yeah, go for it. Why not? If anyone could do it, like, you're going to be the one that's just going to go, I need to talk to her. I need to talk to you about this, and this. And you have a notebook full of stuff that you want to talk about and haven't found anyone that's on your wavelength to talk about it at the moment. So find people in your communities that have the conversation. And if you want to have the conversation about the way that the system is failing us, have the conversation about the way that the system's failing us. Sabia's husband is African and she's Asian. Have the conversation about navigating the dynamics of an interracial family. Have the conversations about hijrah. Have the conversations about making hijrah with a Sen child. How does that work? What does it look like? How does that Sen child add an extra layer of complexity? Does it mean that, okay, we have to rely on the NHS for everything? No, not necessarily. How are we going to empower ourselves to pull away from that? How many times do you need to go to your boss and ask them, oh, can I have the day off for my SEND child has a review of their EHCP that they need to take? And your boss is going to turn around and say, oh, well, can't someone else do it? No, someone else cannot do it.
And work has to give a reasonable adjustments. You know, being a mature student, you have to have reasonable adjustments. They have to put things in place. It's the law.
It's the norm. But is it the norm for us is the question. The question is, when it comes to all of this legislation and policy about SEN, about children, about anything, is it as open to Black and brown Muslims, Jews, Christians, as it is to the white indigenous population who know the way it is, how to advocate for themselves?
Yeah.
And that's what this whole thing is about, is a level of advocacy for us to say, do what's best for your children, do what's best for you, do what's best for your families.
Yeah.
Can we take final thoughts on everything? Because we know Maghrib is kicking in. See the sun disappearing towards my left.
I just wanted to add my final thought first before my daughters start to break loose in my bedroom. I think women, as Muslim women, need to feel empowered enough to understand and ourselves. Understand ourselves enough to understand our children and keep a connection. I think all too many times we don't have faith in ourselves, so we don't make the decisions that we might want to make, but we don't make them before we fall behind. Say, for instance, we talked about home educating, right? I know a lot of parents that, like you shared before I got cut off, is that they don't know the hows and the whys, and all they do is the what ifs, it's a self-doubt that kicks in. Then they self-sabotage themselves into thoughts, well, no, I can't do it. And we just need to have more faith in ourselves and pray istikhara. Don't underestimate istikhara. Don't underestimate the power of dua and guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He guides us in many ways. But are we open to the opportunities He lays before us? That is a question that I will leave with today. Do we see the opportunities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in front of us? Do we read the signs that He gives us in our day-to-day life? Do we follow that instinct that He has innately put within us? That's a question that I leave with today.
Then that's the whole thing, is anyone that wants to answer that question, who's listening, answer that question. Are you fulfilling what your destiny is with Allah? And how do you know how to find that? How are you using it to navigate in your daily lives? Himayah, your next final thoughts?
My thoughts is, honestly, whatever we do it for the sake of Allah. So, just do our best, and I'll turn to Allah, like the sister said, turn to Allah for guidance in every single matter. We do it for ourselves, do it for our children, and do it for the ummah as well. At the end of the day, we're all gonna die. We've all got to answer to Allah, and we're all just trying to do our best. So just ask Allah, raise our hands to our Lord, and just ask Allah to help us through all the adversity, all the difficulties, all the trauma that we've experienced, everything, whatever it is, that it's just turn to Allah, isn't it? At the end of the day, He's the only one who's going to get us out of whatever difficulties we face. And I believe that we've all got this far because we have Allah in our life, without whom we're nothing.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Tahirah, you're next to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely what both sisters said about the empowerment, valuing ourselves, trusting Allah in all of this. Without Allah, we are all nothing. We didn't get to this stage just because we thought we were something. All credit is due to Allah. So if we learn English from a family that didn't have any English, it's the fact that Allah's given us that ability and that power. Let's do something with it. We have the tools. Our parents may not have had the tools. We can't blame them. We can't shame them for that, but we have the ability. So let's be the changes, and make that legacy happen as well. And that's how generational trauma, changes as well. So constant change, constant shifting, constant sort of thinking ahead for our own children, for the ummah wide as well.
So Jazakallah khair, everybody. A great episode. I love the fact that we're able to have such conversations so freely. This is going to go further. It is going to go wider. Our next conversation is about those who are seeking a diagnosis but don't have a diagnosis, and what to do in the interim period. And I think it's going to keep coming back to empowerment. It's going to keep coming back to that idea Allah gave you a purpose and he's put something in your way, which is an obstacle for you to get back to him. So in which avenue are you going to use that to get back to him? But
Yeah.
alhamdulillah, istikhara, dua, reading your Quran, just making sure that you're aware of who he is so that he can show you who he is. Because you can't necessarily find something if you don't know what you're looking for. And with that, sisters, can we round off to, this is episode number 2. Asalaamu alaikum.
Alaikum.
Alaikum salam.